Between October 1st and November 15th, 2024, 37.6 million ounces of silver disappeared from COMEX vaults. That's 47% of registered silver. Gone. In 47 days. The largest vault drain since 1980. You know what else happened in 1980? Silver hit $50 an ounce. The COMEX changed the rules mid-trade to stop two billionaires, and the futures market nearly collapsed. But here's what nobody talks about. Those billionaires weren't trying to corner silver for profit. They were trying to expose a manipulation that had been running for 100 years. And the system destroyed them for it. On February 14, 2025, major South Korean banks stopped selling silver. Not reduced supply. Not temporary suspension. Stopped. Completely. Indefinitely. China blocked citizens from buying physical precious metals through banks. Russia was banned from London trading floors. And right now, something is happening that violates basic market physics. Spot silver is trading higher than futures prices. That's called backwardation. In plain English, people are paying more to get silver today than to get a promise of silver in 6 months. That doesn't happen in functioning markets. That happens when physical supply is gone and paper promises are worthless. This isn't about silver going up. This is about a 150-year price suppression scheme breaking down in real time. And when it breaks completely, physical silver won't just be expensive. It won't exist at any price. Before we talk about manipulation, you need to understand why silver matters more than almost any other commodity on Earth. Gold is money. That's it. Gold sits in vaults. It backs currencies. Theoretically, it's a store of value. But gold doesn't do anything. Silver is different. Silver is money. And the most critical industrial metal in modern technology. Your phone has silver. Solar panels require silver. Electric vehicle electronics use 3 times more silver than combustion engines. Medical equipment. Antibacterial coatings. 5G infrastructure. Missiles. Semiconductors. Every technology defining modern civilization depends on silver. And unlike gold, silver gets consumed. When you use silver in electronics or solar panels, it's gone. You can't economically recover it. It's dispersed in landfills and electronics waste and products that will never be recycled. Gold gets recycled. Almost every ounce of gold ever mined still exists somewhere. Silver disappears. We've been running a supply deficit for 4 consecutive years. 148.9 million ounces in 2024 alone. Meaning we're using 148 million more ounces than we're mining. Where's that silver coming from? Existing stockpiles. Vaults. Government reserves built up over decades. And those stockpiles are running out. The solar panel industry alone could consume 85% to 98% of available silver reserves by 2050, according to University of New South Wales researchers. We're mining less silver every year while using more. The deficit is accelerating. In 2020, global silver mining production was 822 million ounces. By 2024, it dropped to 830 million ounces. That's barely an increase despite exploding demand. Meanwhile, industrial demand jumped from 486 million ounces in 2020 to 620 million ounces in 2024. Investment demand added another 300 million ounces. Do the math. 830 million ounces produced. 920 million ounces consumed. That's a 90 million ounce annual shortfall. Every year, we're draining reserves that took decades to accumulate. The central paradox. So if silver is this critical, this scarce, and this necessary, why isn't the price exploding? Because the price is manipulated. And it has been for over 150 years. The manipulation of silver didn't start in 1980. It didn't start in 1971 when Nixon closed the gold window. It started in 1873 with something called the Crime of 1873. In 1873, Congress passed the Coinage Act, which demonetized silver. Before 1873, the United States operated on a bimetallic standard. Both gold and silver were money. You could mint silver coins, exchange them for gold, and both were legal tender. The Coinage Act ended that. Silver was removed from the monetary system. Only gold remained as the backing for currency. Why? Because silver was abundant. Mines in Nevada were producing massive quantities. If silver remained money, the money supply would expand. Prices would rise. And most importantly, debts would be easier to repay. Who benefits from deflation and tight money? Creditors. Banks. The wealthy who lend money. They want money scarce and valuable, so debts are hard to repay and interest payments stay high. Who loses? Debtors. Farmers. Workers. The middle class who borrow to buy land, equipment, businesses. They wanted silver monetized because it would expand the money supply and make debts easier to service. The crime of 1873 was a wealth transfer from debtors to creditors, disguised as technical monetary policy. And it worked. Deflation followed. Farm prices collapsed. Foreclosures exploded. Banks got richer. By 1900, William Jennings Bryan ran for president on a platform of remonetizing silver. His famous speech, "You shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold." He lost. Silver stayed demonetized. The gold standard remained. The 1965 coin crisis. But silver didn't disappear. It stayed in coins. U.S. dimes, quarters, half dollars, and dollars were 90% silver until 1964. In 1964, something critical happened. The market price of silver rose above the face value of coins. A silver quarter contained 18 cents worth of silver. When silver hit $1.29 per ounce, people started melting coins for profit. The government panicked. If silver coins were worth more as metal than as money, the entire coin system would collapse. So in 1965, Congress passed the Coinage Act of 1965, removing silver from all circulating coins except half dollars, which were reduced to 40% silver. This should have been the signal. When the market values a commodity higher than the government does, the market is telling you the truth. And the government is lying. But instead of letting silver rise, the government sold silver from strategic stockpiles to suppress the price. From 1965 to 1970, the U.S. government dumped billions of ounces of silver onto the market to keep prices low. Why? Because rising silver prices would signal inflation. It would signal that the dollar was losing value. It would undermine confidence in fiat currency, just as the U.S. was printing dollars to fund the Vietnam War and Great Society programs. By 1971, when Nixon closed the gold window, silver was the warning signal everyone ignored. Gold and silver were both saying the same thing. The dollar is being debased. Fiat currency is failing. Hard assets are the only real money. And that's when the paper manipulation began in earnest. Once silver was completely demonetized, removed from coins, and disconnected from the monetary system, Wall Street created the paper market. Futures contracts on COMEX allowed traders to buy and sell silver without ever touching physical metal. Exchange-traded funds like SLV allowed investors to gain exposure to silver prices without taking delivery. Certificates, allocated accounts, unallocated accounts, derivatives, all paper claims on physical silver. Here's how the scam works. A bullion bank, let's say JP Morgan, holds 10 million ounces of physical silver in a vault. But JP Morgan doesn't just sell that silver once. They sell it 100 times through paper contracts. They issue futures contracts representing 1 billion ounces of silver. They sell ETF shares backed by the same 10 million ounces. They create derivatives and swaps with other banks using the same metal as collateral. For every physical ounce, there are 50 to 100 paper claims. As long as most people settle in cash instead of demanding delivery, the system works. The bullion bank collects fees, earns interest, and never has to deliver the metal. The price stays suppressed because the market looks like there's infinite supply. Every time silver starts rising, the banks dump massive paper contracts onto the futures market. Prices drop. Physical buyers get discouraged. The manipulation continues. But who's running this? Who benefits? The manipulation isn't random. It's coordinated by central banks, bullion banks, and exchanges. Here's the structure. At the top, the Bank for International Settlements. The BIS. The Central Bank for Central Banks. The BIS coordinates monetary policy globally. And the BIS has a vested interest in suppressing gold and silver prices. Why? Because rising precious metal prices signal that fiat currencies are failing. Central banks need people to trust paper money. If gold and silver are rising dramatically, it means people are fleeing paper for hard assets. That undermines central bank credibility. Below the BIS, the London Bullion Market Association. The LBMA. The LBMA is where most of the world's gold and silver is traded. Not on exchanges, but over the counter between banks. Opaque. Unregulated. Dominated by a few major players. The LBMA members include JP Morgan, HSBC, Goldman Sachs, and other bullion banks. These banks hold massive short positions in silver, meaning they've sold silver they don't own, betting the price will fall. If silver rises, they lose billions. Then you have COMEX, the commodity exchange in New York, where silver futures are traded. COMEX is owned by CME Group, a private corporation. COMEX sets the rules for trading, delivery, and margin requirements. And critically, COMEX can change those rules whenever they want, which is exactly what they did in 1980. The Hunt brothers, heroes destroyed. In 1979, Nelson Bunker Hunt and William Herbert Hunt, Texas oil billionaires, started buying silver. Not for speculation, because they believed the dollar was collapsing. Inflation was 13%. Nixon had closed the gold window in 1971. The dollar was pure fiat currency backed by nothing. The Hunt brothers believed that silver, real money for 5,000 years, would protect them from currency collapse. They were right, but they made a critical mistake. They used leverage. The Hunts accumulated 200 million ounces of silver, half physical, half futures contracts. They bought futures on margin, controlling massive quantities of silver with relatively little cash down. And they took delivery of the physical metal, draining COMEX vaults. In January 1979, silver was $6 per ounce. By September, $10. By December, $30. On January 17, 1980, silver hit $49.45 per ounce. The Hunt brothers were worth billions. They were the richest men in America. And Wall Street was in full panic. Why? Because if the Hunts kept taking delivery, COMEX would run out of silver. The exchange would default. Everyone would realize that futures contracts were backed by nothing. The entire paper market would collapse. COMEX did what exchanges always do when they're losing. They changed the rules. On January 7, 1980, COMEX implemented Silver Rule 7. New rule: no more long positions. Traders could sell. They could hold existing positions. But they could not buy. This wasn't a market decision. This was the exchange freezing out the Hunt brothers specifically. But silver kept climbing anyway, because the Hunts were holding, not selling. So COMEX raised margin requirements drastically. Overnight, the amount of cash required to hold futures positions increased by several 100%. The Hunts needed hundreds of millions in additional margin immediately. They scrambled to raise cash. They sold assets. They borrowed. But it wasn't enough. On March 27, 1980, Silver Thursday, silver collapsed from $21 to $10.80 in a single day. The Hunt brothers lost $1.7 billion. They declared bankruptcy. Brokerage houses teetered. The Federal Reserve had to intervene to prevent a systemic meltdown. The Hunt brothers were destroyed. Their mistake? They used leverage and played by the exchange's rules. And the exchange changed the rules mid-game. But here's what everyone forgets. The people who bought physical silver, not futures, not paper, but actual metal in their possession, they didn't lose anything. When the dust settled, silver was $10. That's still 66% higher than where it started in January 1979. People who bought physical at $6 and held through the chaos made massive returns. The Hunt brothers failed because they trusted the system. They believed COMEX would honor contracts. They believed the rules were fixed. The lesson of 1980 is this: the system will change the rules to protect itself. Paper contracts are only as good as the exchange's willingness to honor them. But physical metal in your possession can't be confiscated, can't be margin called, and can't be ruled away. After the Hunt brothers were destroyed, the silver manipulation entered a new phase: institutional suppression. From 1980 to 2000, silver prices were range-bound between $4 and $8 per ounce, despite increasing industrial demand. How? Central banks and governments sold silver reserves, leased silver to bullion banks who sold it into the market, and allowed unlimited paper contracts to be created. The manipulation was so obvious that in 2004, a group of investors filed a class action lawsuit against JP Morgan and HSBC for manipulating silver prices. The lawsuit alleged that these banks colluded to suppress silver through massive short selling on COMEX. In 2020, JP Morgan paid $920 million to settle charges with the Department of Justice and the Commodity Futures Trading Commission for spoofing, placing fake orders to manipulate prices in precious metals markets. This wasn't a conspiracy theory. This was proven. Prosecuted. J.P. Morgan paid nearly $1 billion in fines. But did the manipulation stop? No, because the fine was less than 1 year of profits. J.P. Morgan paid the penalty and kept manipulating. Why? Because J.P. Morgan and other bullion banks make money from the manipulation. They hold massive short positions in silver. Every time silver starts rising, they dump paper contracts to knock the price down. They profit from the decline. Then they cover their shorts cheap and repeat. But there's a deeper reason for the suppression. Silver and gold prices are the canary in the coal mine for fiat currency. When precious metals rise dramatically, it signals that people are losing confidence in paper money. Central banks need confidence in the dollar, the euro, the yen. They need people to hold bonds paying 4% instead of buying silver paying nothing but appreciating 20% annually. If silver and gold are soaring, it reveals that inflation is higher than official numbers, that currencies are being debased, and that the system is breaking. So suppressing silver and gold prices isn't just about profits for bullion banks. It's about maintaining confidence in the entire fiat currency system. But that suppression depends on one thing: physical supply. And physical supply is disappearing. Let me show you what's happening right now, using COMEX's own data. On October 1st, 2024, COMEX had 80.6 million ounces of registered silver. Registered means available for delivery against futures contracts. On December 3rd, 2024, 43.2 million ounces. That's a 37.4 million ounce drop in 47 days. That's not normal profit-taking. That's a bank run. And it's accelerating. On November 17th alone, 6.3 million ounces were withdrawn in a single day. On November 21st, another 4.8 million ounces. The vaults are being drained faster than they can be replenished. Total COMEX vaults, registered plus eligible, hold about 265 million ounces. But only registered silver, the 43 million ounces, is actually available for delivery. There are hundreds of millions of ounces in open futures contracts. If even 20% of contract holders demand delivery, COMEX doesn't have the metal. This is exactly what happened to the Hunt brothers in reverse. In 1980, two men demanded delivery and nearly broke the exchange. Now, it's not two men. It's sovereign nations, industrial users, and investors worldwide demanding physical metal. On February 14, 2025, for major South Korean banks, Shinhan Bank, KB Kookmin Bank, Hana Bank, and Woori Bank, simultaneously suspended sales of physical silver. Not reduced. Suspended. Indefinitely. These are banks with hundreds of billions in assets and global supply chains. If they can't source silver, what does that tell you about actual supply? China raised the risk classification on precious metals purchases. Chinese citizens literally cannot buy gold or silver through banks anymore. Why? Because China is hoarding for the state. They've restricted exports. They require physical deposits for futures trading. They're preparing for a monetary reset where hard assets back currency. India's silver imports hit record highs in 2024. Indians understand currency crisis. They've seen the rupee collapse multiple times. They know physical metals preserve wealth when paper fails. Russia was banned from the London bullion market in 2022 after invading Ukraine. But Russia didn't stop buying silver and gold. They just buy through other channels. Russia's central bank has increased gold reserves every year since 2006. They're de-dollarizing, building reserves in hard assets, not paper. And now, the ultimate signal, backwardation. In a normal commodity market, futures prices are higher than spot prices. Why? Because futures represent delivery in the future, which includes storage costs, interest, and time value. A futures contract should always cost more than immediate delivery. But right now, spot silver is trading higher than 6-month futures. People are paying more to get silver today than to get silver in 6 months. This violates basic market logic unless physical supply is gone. If you're paying premiums for immediate delivery, it means you don't trust that silver will be available in 6 months. It means the paper price is lying and physical is desperate. We are watching in real time the same pattern that destroyed the Hunt brothers, except reversed. In 1980, the Hunt brothers were demanding delivery, and the exchange ran out of silver. They changed the rules to save the system. Now the entire world is demanding delivery. China, India, Russia, sovereign wealth funds, industrial users, retail investors. COMEX can't change the rules on everyone simultaneously. What happens next? COMEX has three options. First, raise margin requirements to make holding futures prohibitively expensive. This forces speculators out, but doesn't solve the physical shortage. Second, suspend delivery and force cash settlement. This means futures contracts get paid in dollars, not silver. Contract holders sue. The paper market loses all credibility. Third, let the market run and watch silver go parabolic. They'll try option 1 first. Raise margins. Restrict positions. Slow the drain. But that only works if demand is speculative. If industrial users need physical silver for manufacturing, they'll pay any margin. If sovereign nations are accumulating for monetary reserves, they'll take delivery regardless. When stage 4 hits, and it's coming, here's what it looks like. Stage 1, early warning signs. Trading halts become common. COMEX suspends silver trading for volatility or system issues. The real reason, they can't deliver. Stage 2, system stress visible. Delivery failures cascade. Futures contracts default. Investors holding paper silver get cash settlement at prices far below physical market value. Lawsuits follow. Stage 3, partial failures. Premiums explode. Spot price says $60. Physical dealers charge $90, $100, $120 just to get metal. Eventually, no price gets you silver. Dealers are sold out. Mints have year-long waiting lists. Stage 4, complete breakdown. The paper market collapses. Futures trading suspended permanently. ETFs freeze redemptions. Certificates become worthless. And physical silver, the actual metal in your possession, becomes the only silver that matters. People holding physical watch from safety. They already won. The historical parallel. This has happened before. Not just with silver, but with every commodity where paper claims exceeded physical supply. In 2001, palladium prices spiked 263% in 2 years. Russia controlled 60% of global supply and delayed shipments. Physical vanished. Paper traders holding futures got destroyed when there was no metal for delivery. People holding physical palladium made fortunes. In 1971, when Nixon closed the gold window, the same pattern. Foreign central banks demanded gold for dollars. The U.S. didn't have enough. Nixon defaulted on the gold backing. Gold went from $35 to $850 over the next decade. A 2,400% increase. People holding paper dollars lost 96% of their purchasing power against gold. The pattern is always the same. Paper claims exceed physical supply. Demand for physical accelerates. The system changes rules or defaults. Paper becomes worthless. Physical explodes. We're watching this pattern play out with silver right now. And it's not speculation. It's math. Global silver production, 830 million ounces annually. Industrial demand, 620 million ounces. Investment demand, 300 million ounces. That's 920 million ounces of demand against 830 million ounces of supply. The 90 million ounce shortfall comes from existing stockpiles, government reserves, COMEX vaults, SLV holdings. And those stockpiles are being drained. When the stockpiles run out, and they will, the only source of new supply is mining. But you can't increase mining overnight. It takes years to open new mines. Existing mines are depleting, or grades are falling. Physics doesn't care about paper contracts. You cannot mine silver with monetary policy. You cannot print ounces into existence. You cannot suppress a price forever when physical supply is gone. The manipulation worked for 150 years because supply exceeded demand. That era is over. Why this time is different? This isn't about trading silver for quick profits. This isn't investment advice. This is pattern recognition. Every fiat currency in history has failed. Every single one. The average lifespan is 27 years. The US dollar has been fully fiat since 1971. That's 54 years. We're on borrowed time. When currencies fail, people flee to hard assets. Gold, silver, real estate, commodities, anything that cannot be printed, debased, or inflated away. Silver is unique because it's both a monetary metal and an industrial necessity. You can't build the green energy economy without silver. You can't manufacture electronics without silver. You can't deploy 5G without silver. Governments will try to suppress the price as long as possible, because rising silver reveals their currency debasement. But suppression requires physical supply, and the supply is gone. The Hunt brothers tried to expose this in 1980. They were destroyed because they used leverage and trusted the system. But they proved the system was rigged. They proved that when physical delivery is demanded, the vaults are empty. Now, 45 years later, the same thing is happening. Except this time, it's not two billionaires. It's China, India, Russia, and millions of investors worldwide. The COMEX vault drain. The South Korean bank suspensions. The Chinese restrictions. The backwardation. These aren't coincidences. These are symptoms of a system breaking. The pattern has played out 4 times before. 1873. The crime of 1873 demonetized silver to benefit creditors and banks. 1971. Nixon closed the gold window and precious metals exploded over the next decade. 1980. The Hunt brothers exposed the manipulation and the system destroyed them by changing the rules. 2025. The manipulation is breaking because physical supply cannot meet demand. And this time, the system can't stop it by changing rules on 2 men. They'd have to change rules on the entire world. The window to act is closing. Not because someone is telling you to buy, but because the market itself is screaming that physical supply is gone. When stage 4 hits, when the paper market collapses, physical silver will not be available at any price. Not because people won't sell, but because there's nothing left to buy. The pattern is clear. The evidence is mounting. The physics is undeniable. 37.6 million ounces vanished in 47 days. And the drain continues. The silver shortage is real.